So we're really pleased today to have two experts to talk to us about community engagement. Elizabeth Diego works for the Water Resources Authority in Kenya as a manager for resource mobility and stakeholder engagement. She is passionate about undertaking community engagement transformation through water resources, environment, natural resource management projects, and programs. She is a lifelong member of the International Association of Community Development and the current vice chair for Women in Water and Sanitation Association in Kenya. Jessica Trejo leads the WASH Social Innovations for the Global South within Hansgrohe, a German multinational corporation. She aims to create positive gender, economic, and environmental impacts through capacity building and water efficient solutions developed with and for rural communities. Currently, her work is centered on developing a social business approach around water-saving, experience-enhancing products for personal hygiene in Uganda and technical trainings for women in Kenya. We're really glad to have both of you here today. And to start off the conversation, Elizabeth, I'm going to ask you the first question and that let you and Jessica take it away. So Elizabeth, can you talk to us a little bit about community engagement from the role of government working on water resources?
Thank you, Catherine. It's very exciting to be here today. So from the role of government, it's quite at the high level, but we say community engagement as defined by government is listening to the different voices, all the voices in its place, the weak, the women, the children, and then articulating all their voices into policies. And these policies, the government hopes that everybody within the sector would implement. For example, if we, in terms of water resources, Kenya is a water scarce country. So you're looking at who are the major users of water and who are the users of water. So the major users are probably commercial, the ones who have big factories, and these factories are within a community space. And you're looking at community members. Who are these community members who draw water? So you're looking at protecting the water sources and having the big companies draw the water from the sources, competing with the communities. And all these people, you have to moderate them as government. So it's basically providing an enabling environment from a government perspective with policies that ensures that everybody has an access. It might not always be access in equity, but at least everybody must be allocated what they need. But the first priority is for the community, the people who don't have any other source, but also take care of the water resources within. So that's the perspective from a government's eye. So Jessica, my colleague, what do you think community engagement from your perspective inside a corporate organization, especially working on hygiene? What is it that you define as community engagement?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Yes, it's quite interesting because although we are talking about the same thing, we get to it from different routes. So in my case, as it was said in the introduction, so we are developing products for rural communities, which is quite interesting because you have to and you want to develop things that actually people need and want to have. But at the same time, because it's not going to be a charity, but it's something that the people would acquire themselves, that also changes the power dynamic. Instead of seeing them as a beneficiaries, somebody who will just receive the product, you need to understand what are their needs, what are their actual needs, limitations, what is environment. So you want to understand them, yet at the same time, find a way that you can still add value, especially when you talk about communities, rural communities, because we know what is the reality, but still following the same pattern that we follow when we talk about normal business, you find there are quite a lot of similarities because at the end of the day, we're all humans and we have basic needs and the triggers are very much the same, although the interpretation of them is different. So we have to engage with the communities, but really with the curiosity of understanding what are the real lived realities. and where can we actually offer an added value. This happens to us when we talk about product development here or there. So this is a little bit of the perspective from the private sector, let's say. But now, Elizabeth, I wanted to jump back to something that you said, because when you want to bring everybody together on the table, especially if the government is present, that might be a bit overwhelming for some people, especially those that are not used to being heard. So how do you actually ensure, and is it hard to get the local voices being heard and respected at the table when there are just too many people and too many interests present?
Very good, Jessica. So it's very interesting when you talk about water resources. So first thing, we talk about local voices, yes, but the most important voice is the voice that is not heard. So for example, when you have a river, you're looking at a water resource in its entirety. And you want to ensure the first voice that you must make sure of is the environment. So the environmental flow. What are the aquatic animals that will not have a voice? We call them part of the community. So you must make sure that with the scientists, you understand their perspective of what is it on the river that must be taken care of before even the human being comes as a local voice. So getting those voices is very difficult because no one thinks about the frog that needs the water. No one thinks about the fireflies that needs the water. So first, you map it out and you sort of do a 360 turn. The voices that will be heard, the voices that will not be heard. So the first thing that we do is that you take care of the voices that will not be heard in one table. So sometimes you have very many stakeholders. You have the people who have the water, people who own the water, people who have the bigger shares of allocation, the entrepreneurs who have business at stake. And then you have the people who draw the water. And remember, the water at one point might be polluted. So what we do is that the local voices are very hard to get to the table. So what you do, you have a special time for them to get their voices so that by the time you come with them to a stakeholders table, you as a facilitator on the side of government, or I could talk to you in your corporate, you bring out the voices that usually would not be heard. And therefore you might be talking about the tools you have, but you're talking about the rural communities who don't have access. You must have done your homework before to be able to know at this table, we have these local voices that might be very intimidated by the bigger people, but you've had a separate session for them. So you come to the table and have it in a group. When it comes from you, people will start listening because usually the local voices know a lot of things, but they don't want to talk about it when they have the decision makers on the table. So you bring them together. Yes, it's hard, but it's how passionate you are about changing the society, about changing the environment. And the key is water resources. So we first say the local voice that must be heard is that of the frog that has to live on the water. So if you draw all the water and the frog doesn't survive, then we have dry rivers, and then the next thing is conflict. So when you bring everybody together, you speak to the voices that are not even heard, then you must make sure that the entrepreneur knows that should he take all the water from the river or from the source, should he pollute the source, the people who work in his industry will not be able to report to work. He will have losses in his company because now if you don't have the workers to do the work, you won't have the produce that you're supposed to take to the market. So that's how we bring in all the voices within or without. And usually the local voices are key. They're bottom, and that's why we try as much in government to listen to the voices, to be able to make policies, so that when you're doing your policies, you have the local voice that probably won't sit in the boardroom, but is your most interested party within the whole catchment or within the water resource. So Jessica, do you have local voices within your stakeholders?
We do.
All
And
right.
it's actually quite interesting what you said, because as I mentioned, since we want to develop something that is very innovative, where we are taking a very unusual target group, because you might think, okay, what is a German corporate which normally does premium and luxury showering, faucets and showers, doing in a rural community where there's not even a water connection. And it's quite interesting because at the end of the day, we go back to the same basic needs. You know, hygiene, personal hygiene is a basic need. It's just a matter of how do we do it differently. And that's why it's so important to build this bridge on both sides, to understand what is the reality, what are the needs, what is the culture of the people, to understand where do they see the value, you know, because even sometimes a lot of the people go directly into the money, but even if it was for free, that doesn't actually define whether a person is going to continue using your product or not. So it's how do you understand what are the triggers, what are the motivations of the people? And that's why it's not just community engagement in a sense of I do a survey and that's it. No, you really need to be there. You need to experiment. You need to feel it on yourself. What is it to carry the water? And this is one of the benefits. I come originally from Mexico, and we have similar problems with water stress. So I know how it is to have to fetch the water. We don't bathe with the hands. We have a small device to bathe, which is very different, because then you have to explain to this German community, hey, you find the way, you know, you have to understand what is the need, and then you'll find the way. It's not the same as if I tell you, you have to do it as when you want to do it. So, yes.
I love the aspects you're talking about culture, and culture is very unique. So what do you think are the unique aspects or challenges of doing this type of engagement around hygiene?
It's actually quite interesting, because although culture is very unique, they are actually certain things that are across humans. So when you talk about hygiene, you go away from what you should do and you turn it into what you want to do. It has to do also with ourselves. You know, it's the same as I know I should take care of what I eat. But if I see it as a burden, I see it all the conflicts. Oh, I don't have time to cook. I don't have money to buy proper food. But if I change it into I want to do this, then I will find the time. I will find what fits my budget. And I think the unique aspects is when you can find and understand what brings the people dignity, what people also brings this convenience as well, because the behavioral change happens really when you build something around the lived realities, not just assumptions or ideas about, oh, it should be like this, because we don't do that anymore. We are humans. We're not Homo economics. And when you actually, and this is the very unique part of it, when you find a product that fits the wallet, which you need in any market, in any circumstances, but in this particular, it has to fit the wallet, it has to reach the village, and it has to respect the customer's dignity. You need to understand that there has to be an added value to both of them, while understanding what are the limitations as well. It's quite interesting that in one of the last community engagements that I did, I was in a remote community in Raqqa, in the area of Raqqa in Uganda. And we were talking about water saving. And there was this young boy, he was very active. And he said, oh, you Muzungus, you always come here and tell us we have to save water. And I don't care about saving water. And I said, okay, do you care about saving money? What if I tell you that I can help you save money? And he said, okay, then I will listen. And at the end of the day, it's the same. It's just a matter of how you present it. It's just a matter of finding these triggers, which is the same as for any of us. You know, you might buy a certain product, or you might do a certain change in your life because of status, or because of health, or because you see the bigger picture, or because there's social pressure. Social pressure goes both ways, in a positive or in a negative way. So yeah, it's quite interesting because you find more commonalities than really differences. I have to say, especially when you try to bring these completely, apparently, like completely different worlds.
Mhm.
And this is also something that I find interesting from the aspect of how community engagement is looked at. A lot of the times, my perspective is when I talk to NGOs, when I work with government, the community is seen as a very passive. It's kind of an input giver.
Yeah.
We try to convince them to do something that is good for them. It's like when you talk to children, you know, and you tell them, look, this is good for you. You don't understand that now, but trust me on this one. If you change this, if you do this, and especially when you talk about WASH, this would be also good for you. But a lot of the times it's a very short-minded, because we haven't really understood, we haven't really taken the time, and how do I make that the person, that the community themselves, they ask for the change. They come and say, hey, get me involved, change the way I do, and not just from this passive to really active, to be the ones that initiate these kind of actions.
Oh, nice. It's we can always talk about community on and on and on and on. So what's the most rewarding aspect of working on community engagement for you?
I think is when you find this the similarities, when you understand that acknowledgement, respect, belonging is something that we all want. It's just the interpretation of it changes according to the environment. And I do think that development and business could learn a lot from each other. You know, development can learn to be more efficient from like a business perspective, but business could also learn how to be more human from the side of development. What do you think government can actually add to the equation?
It's very interesting. So there's, as a person, you're working for government and the policies and the structures, but I've learned the most rewarding thing for me is when I listen to the voices down at the community level and then keep building on the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge they have. And then when I put it into a document and it becomes policy, and then the communities call and say, hi, oh my goodness, we have these. We're the ones who have actually told the government what to do. And that just makes the project so sustainable, so sustainable. So the most rewarding is just listening to them and taking them through all processes and seeing how they grow. And then when they see the policy, I'm telling you, anybody coming into that community, they say, we have these resources. We could do this. So you don't have to give us everything. All you need to do is just a bit of training. And it goes so well. I think in Kenya, we've moved quite a bit. We have a water resource users association taking care of each river. And now we have a lobby group just for water resources. And it's amazing that you have these communities in the lobby group. Some of them, right now, there's one who's gone to Denmark for 1 month training on change management. How amazing is that? And then so he will come and train the others. And so people say, oh my goodness, it's possible. It's possible that we can actually advocate. And up to now, if there's pollution, they report. If there's an obstruction that is illegal, they report. So they start owning these resources. And the beauty is in, the reward is in seeing them take proactive action other than waiting for government or someone to come and do it.
Exactly.
Because it's their resource.
Exactly. And I think that's the key, to really find, okay, what is it that is going to actually trigger that community? Because it's not a one size fit all, but really understand, okay, what triggers the people and the community to want to be part of this change, and how do they see it? Is it water saving or is it money saving?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.